Plastics are being used to such an extent throughout the world that we may well ask what was used before its discovery.
We have to start here, in the 1940s.
The future will bring plastic fabrics wondrously fine, shoes more glamorous than Cinderella's.
Modern plastic didn't really get its start until World War II, when the military realized how versatile it could be.
If you're old enough to remember the old-fashioned glass windscreens, this is what happened when you banged your nut.
Yeah, huge improvement there. But after the war ended, plastic companies needed to find new ways to sell their products.
Both sheets and powder are now being dramatically applied to peacetime living in hundreds of beautiful and useful ways.
And so, plastic went from protecting cargo to protecting our leftovers.
Food stored in Baggy's plastic bags always have the sound of freshness.
And nylon went from the skies to our thighs.
They stretch better to fit better.
And of course, who could forget?
My mama done told me, she told me, hun, we're having a party, a Tupperware party.
People went absolutely crazy for plastic.
In a new plastic decorator container.
Put them in a polyethylene plastic bag.
And to brighten up the plastic tree, plastic decorations.
Nowadays, everything can be made in plastic.
This was where our addiction began. For decades, Americans had a make it do or do without mentality. But our new throwaway culture fell in love with single-use plastics and didn't worry about the consequences.
Being disposable, there are no empties to collect.
Vinyl and asbestos on the floor.
In fresh sun, sea, and sky colors.
Oh, the irony.
When manufacturers started using plastic for consumer goods, they treated it as a durable material, using it to make objects meant to last.
This is an American city, a real community of homes and homemakers like thousands of others across the nation. We call it Plastics Town, USA. The table is set with polyethylene products, too.
America's post-war boom presented endless opportunities for this new, durable, lightweight material.
Modern-day miracles that were made with the help of petrochemicals.
From packaging to clothing to home furnishings.
Very durable.
Plastic's wide-ranging applications.
Glassine, polyethylene, mylar,
promised a new world through chemistry.
Step into the world of man-made materials that take up where nature left off.
But pretty soon, manufacturers realized that the fastest way to increase profits would be to get people to buy plastic, use it once, and then throw it away. At one plastics industry conference in 1956, a speaker looked out at the crowd of plastic manufacturers and said to them, "Your future is in the garbage wagon." And things started to explode.
Baggy's plastic bags always have the sound of freshness.
A new invention from Procter &
You just throw the whole razor away.
This new 2-liter plastic bottle.
Handles easy.
These lighter plastic bottles take pounds off your shopping load. And they're strong enough to protect against some of life's hard knocks.
Consider the soda bottle. In 1947, 100% of soda was sold in refillable bottles. But in the 1950s, a few soda makers realized that it was cheaper to make soda at one centralized factory and ship it around the country by putting it in bottles that could just be thrown away. When disposable bottles were introduced, people didn't know what to do with them. There were few public garbage bins, and people would throw them on the ground if they weren't at home. A major littering problem had arrived.
1970 was the dawn of the environmental movement as we know it. The recycling symbol was originally created as a part of a contest for the very first Earth Day. And in 1975, Coca-Cola introduced the world's first plastic soda bottle. Coca-Cola's president at the time said that one of its major advantages compared to glass was its environmental advantages. And he also proudly proclaimed that it is, quote, highly resistant to biodegradation and exposure to water and sunlight. Switching from reusable glass, the profit potential for Coca-Cola was staggering. One single reusable bottle removed from the system would result in 20 to 40 single-use containers consumed and permanently trashed. The cost of the packaging was essentially 100% passed on to the consumer and to the environment. And by the late 80s, almost all glass refillable soda milk bottles were out of commission.
Naturally, generating all of this new waste had consequences. Coca-Cola and Dixie Cup and a bunch of other companies got together and formed an organization called Keep America Beautiful and started making PSAs.
Daddy, you forgot. Every litter bit hurts.
Right, Susan Spotless. Every litter bit, thoughtlessly dropped, blemishes a bit of America.
These got people to stop littering and shifted the responsibility of dealing with waste from manufacturers to the consumers. And for a while, that worked.
A unique day in American history is ending, a day set aside for a nationwide outpouring of mankind seeking its own survival. Earth Day.
By 1970, citizens were increasingly concerned about the environment. Manufacturers were facing growing pressure to take responsibility for excess production.
The garbage, the trash, the carbon monoxide, the junk.
So on Earth Day, the next year, Keep America Beautiful released this.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
During the 60s, global plastic production increased 400%, and by 1979, we were producing more plastic than steel. But people were starting to worry about plastic side effects.
Exposing animals to BPA resulted in serious ailments that signaled problems in humans.
We are suspicious of acrylonitrile because it's chemically related to vinyl chloride.
Utter nonsense.
Side note, they were talking about these bottles specifically, which were created by Coca-Cola and Monsanto in 1975. And surprise, acrylonitrile is toxic, and it was used in food and beverage containers for 3 decades. It was finally banned in 1977, and the bottles were taken off the shelves. And as the research was stacking up, so was the garbage. Due to a landfill shortage, a ship nicknamed the Garbage Barge made headlines in 1987 after it wandered the shorelines for months looking for a place to dump its trash. And it got people talking.
It may seem odd to you that for such a large country we're having trouble with our garbage, but we're drowning in this stuff.
And in the 70s, after microwaves were considered a miraculous invention, and by the 80s they became way more affordable after Japanese manufacturers entered the market. And in 1986, the Campbell Soup Company proudly declared the Swanson aluminum tray is history when they replaced it with plastic so that consumers could easily find it. And in 1987, environmental activists targeted styrofoam. The plastic's gases were proven to be an ozone destroyer. And enter McDonald's again, as they were the largest consumer of styrofoam. Environmentalists launched the McToxics campaign. It was a grassroots effort that really was the first of its kind. McDonald's describes styrofoam as, quote, basically air, and that foam packaging is good for landfill because it aerates the soil. Customers really began to start mailing their trash back to the company, and styrofoam bans started popping up around the country. So under pressure, McDonald's agreed to recycle it all. As plastic usage exploded, the public demanded government-mandated recycling. And so in 1988, the SPI, which was a trade association that represented nearly all plastic manufacturers, decided to intervene. They feared government bans and regulations that had started to pop up. So they embarked on a campaign to greenwash the world. And they did it by stealing Earth Day's recycling symbol. They altered it by entering a number into the middle of it, defining various grades of plastic from 1 to 7. They then lobbied this system to state and local governments as a coding system, which would somehow magically guarantee recycling because they had numbers on it. And their lies worked, unfortunately. This system was informally adopted, and then they embarked on a multi-million-dollar campaign to promote disposable plastics to consumers as environmentally neutral.
The exact problem of plastic in ocean is this. Now you come to the plastic graveyard here in the ocean.
The washed-up remains of a throwaway society.
Now you see the enormity of the problem.
This isn't litter that's been dropped on the beach. It's come in from the sea, recklessly thrown away, distributed on the currents, and then swept ashore.
Of all the plastic that enters the ocean, we can only see about 1% of it. The other 99% is missing. It entered the ocean and it hasn't been seen since.
With that, in 2007, San Francisco banned plastic bags.
They end up as a litter problem. The city has to spend tens of millions of dollars cleaning up that litter problem. They get in the ocean and they're ingested by marine mammals, turtles. They cause huge problems there.
The measure would require stores to offer only bags made of recyclable paper, reusable cloth, or new bio bags that can be turned into compost.
Powerful plastic lobbies freaked out, worrying that the trend would catch on, and spent millions trying to overturn the statewide bill in 2015. They also successfully lobbied states to preemptively ban plastic bag bans, under the guise of protecting the consumer in the grocery stores. And so, the plastic bag remains, as does our plastic addiction. In 2014, 100 billion plastic bags were used in the US. That's almost one per person per day.
Keep America Beautiful Senior Director Randy Hartman says that it has expanded its efforts to promote recycling. It partners with local communities to do so.
It's about the idea that the elites trying to implant in your brain the idea that the way you deal with your waste at home is actually the central question for humanity in the 21st century, not only for your life, but for the planet Earth and even more. So you are responsible for separating the waste you produced. You terrible consumer, you're to blame for the whole misery. And of course it encourages a lot of very negative things. Talk about the bin police here in Britain. We've got all that. We've got lockable bins, we've got the bin police, we've got video cameras who's gonna watch exactly where you're gonna throw your green bottle in what kind of bin. So it encourages a very negative neighborhood atmosphere, spying out your neighbors. Distrust is part of that whole program. And of course, maybe most importantly, it absolutely refocuses your general outlook in life and the question you should ask. Instead of asking questions, how can we get on in society? How can we get more? How can we increase our living standards? How can we develop society as a whole? You're asked to separate your waste, to wash out your yogurt cup, and make sure your next door neighbor knows exactly how to deal with all these important problems.
Recycling just makes you feel good. But what actually happens to all the plastic bottles? We're going to focus on polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, the type of plastic with a 1 printed on the bottom. The ethylene terephthalate refers to this. String a bunch of these together and you get polyethylene terephthalate, a durable, flexible plastic that can be heated up and molded into lots of convenient shapes. After you recycle a plastic bottle, it gets hauled off and sent to a recycling plant. They take off the labels and clean it and separate all of the PET bottles, not just from the glass and metal and paper, but also from the other kinds of plastic. That's because different types of polymers do not always play well together. For example, polyvinyl chloride, which most of the pipes in your home are probably made of, can totally ruin a batch of PET. You have to heat up a batch of PET so much just to soften and mold it that the PVC will start to chemically break down and produce hydrochloric acid, which can actually degrade the PET. So sorting is super important, and so is cleaning to remove as much impurity as possible. In this case, that includes both things like that last backwashy sip of soda and other kinds of plastic. That's one major factor in why it's both hard and expensive to recycle bottles into more bottles. But when the plastic isn't good enough for recycling into more bottles, it's still sometimes good enough to spin into fiber for clothing or carpets or whatever else you use fiber for. Which, incidentally, is now called polyester, even though chemically, it hasn't changed. That's right, most polyester and PET plastic are chemically the same thing. The plastic is just ground and shredded and melted until it can be spun into thread and then woven into fabric. This type of recycling is sometimes called downgrading, because once the plastic becomes fabric, it can no longer be recycled again. There is also a form of recycling that changes the chemistry of PET, and is in fact called chemical recycling. It requires putting enough energy into the plastic to break the chemical bonds holding the polymer together, converting PET back into its individual parts. These molecules can be used to remake PET or even made into different types of plastic, but chemical recycling is really expensive, so we don't do it very much. So that's why bottles become clothes and not new bottles, because making bottles requires super clean plastic, and that's tough to get. But even though going from a plastic bottle to a handbag is technically a downgrade, at least it's much cuter now, right? Right?
Companies are choosing to make something that will be used just once, from a material that lasts forever. If you don't like what throwaway plastics are already doing to our world, brace yourself. We face a tsunami of throwaway plastic in our and the ocean's future. 4 times more plastic will be produced between now and the middle of the century than has been produced in all of history. 4 times more. What can we do? Recycling? Of all the plastic ever generated as of 2015, only 9% was recycled. Even when it is recycled, plastic degrades. Your plastic soda bottle maybe becomes a shampoo bottle, then a floor mat. Even in the best case, it doesn't recycle, it downcycles. And then it becomes pollution that ruins our beaches and chokes sea animals forever. We should not be forced to pollute the ocean every time we eat, drink, or go shopping. We need to be given a choice. A plastic-free choice. This is not hard to imagine. Indeed, some responsible companies are already leading the way. There are throwaway plastic-free aisles in supermarkets. Beverage companies already offer plastic-free soda and salsa water. Restaurants offer plastic-free service. There are plastic-free rooms in hotels. An airline is now offering a plastic-free flight. Peru passed a law that keeps plastic out of national parks and beaches. Belize is getting rid of styrofoam. And the European Union has mandated reductions for throwaway plastic throughout its 28 member countries. But with your help, we can do more. Together, we can create a movement to reduce throwaway plastic. We can make sure we're all given real plastic-free choices. We can help our cities, towns, schools, and workplaces establish zones that are free of throwaway plastic. Let's stop plastic pollution from wrecking our beaches and our oceans, and have healthy oceans that delight and sustain us for generations to come.